Oh man, did this work? We'll find out in just a second. Right now I'm moving the keyboard furiously, trying to keep Tuco from typing on it and or licking everything. Hi. Welcome back to the stream, if indeed we are back, which I will try to determine in just a second. Looks like we're live on the YouTubes. We're live on the Twitches. Well, welcome back if anybody is out there. Tuco is already here on my desk. Oh gosh, you can see me, but not the cat. That's a problem. Let's quickly solve this. Anyway, welcome back. This stream might be a bit more rambly than like 100% like really extreme project everything 100% of the time. But looks like Tuco's sitting right here, and the white balance is kind of weird right now. I have one of my studio lights moved to the middle of the shop, and so you're seeing mostly sunlight right now, which I guess is not quite what the camera's set up for. Let's put a card in here, why not? Oh, geez, did I already have a card in here? I don't know what's on that card. I'll figure that out later. So yeah, I've been actually pretty excited about something that's somewhat new to me. It's probably pretty old to some of you, but I find it new and exciting right now. And that's some of the ongoing developments in the decentralized web, specifically decentralized video. And so I'll get more into the decentralized web, but like if you've heard of Mastodon, like, I don't know, I've been like on and off Mastodon for a while, and I think especially recently I've been having a much better time there than Twitter, and haven't been using Twitter very much. And it's been nice just seeing, I don't know, like the difference between an ecosystem of like projects that kind of want you to work with them versus like a single large entity that doesn't really want to work with you. And there are, you know, plenty of pluses and minuses for kind of collections of small decentralized services rather than one central one, but I tend to prefer decentralization for a lot of reasons, and it's been exciting. So we can talk more about that in a bit, but yeah, I've been experimenting with this decentralized alternative to kind of big video sharing sites. And so it's basically an alternative, it's basically an open source project you can run on your server, and it gives you a website that looks kind of like something like YouTube or Vimeo, where you can watch videos streaming at different resolutions, you can upload them, there's some social features. But PeerTube, I think what it's really cool, what it's doing a really good job at right now is it's building something which is on its own a pretty good just like video hosting site basically, but it's building that in a way that you can connect a bunch of instances of these together to form a larger network that doesn't have to be owned by one entity. And so if you're familiar with other decentralized web projects like Mastodon or like IPFS, then you might see some similarities. So yeah, I've been pretty into the idea. Well, I've been into the idea for a long time of having places to host my videos other than YouTube, because I really do find big platforms like YouTube really depressing. Like, I grew up with this internet that had this much more kind of decentralized, do-it-yourself atmosphere to it, and then saw that gradually displaced by these large companies that were, for a time, way more convenient for a lot of people. And so it's interesting trying to see, well, now that those large solutions have clearly shown their problematic side to a lot of people, maybe that can help us, you know, get together critical mass for getting people excited about smaller solutions. So, I think the cool thing about a lot of these decentralized solutions is, like, part of their nature is there is no, like, one big thing that you're trying to, like, get everyone's energy behind. Like, it's fine, like, it's actually working properly if there are a bunch of small PeerTube instances, and there isn't, like, one big one that gets, like, billions of likes and whatever. So I'm pretty into that. And so I tried uploading some of my videos to one of the public instances, and that seemed pretty good, although I found myself really just wanting like faster transcodes and higher upload limits and just the kind of thing that I could just do myself if I was hosting the server, so that I could really quickly get just like get my whole backlog, but also maybe provide a place for other sort of like-minded video producers and streamers to hang out. And just to be clear, PeerTube is not streaming. Maybe it is in the future, but like that's not what they're focusing on yet. Like it's entirely about sharing, you know, produced video content of some sort. So people use it for like hosting, you know, like one of the biggest PeerTube sites right now is actually the one that Blender runs. They host their open source movies, but people use them for video blogs. There have been maybe a small trickle of YouTubers trying out the platform, trying out the many separate platforms that the constellation of PeerTube servers would represent. So yeah, I find it interesting. Interesting enough that I've been doing some sysadmin-y stuff to set that up. And so one thing that makes it easy to play with that here is that I've got really good internet here. That's part of why it's easy to stream to multiple services. So I also had some spare hardware. I recently upgraded the computer that I use for editing, and the spare motherboard for that, plus some hard disks that were part of an offline archive of videos that I don't need to keep as big anymore. Like, I already had some spare parts that I could just throw together mostly into a good PeerTube machine. So that's what I've been experimenting with. Maybe I'll show some more of that off. It looks like Tuco's over there chewing on bungee cords. I should actually get the robot turned on. It's like staring at the ceiling, because right now, one thing we should work on is I'd like to have a more methodical like startup and shutdown procedure for the gimbal. Because right now I just kill power to turn it off, and to turn it on, there's a very simple startup procedure that the firmware is in charge of. The firmware in the gimbal specifically. But for shutting it off, I could kind of slowly shut it off so it doesn't kind of hit the end stop. Right now the lens has a tendency to hit one of the motors. Oh, we are really wobbling. Okay, there are so many, as usual, bugs I could talk about here, but I was going to try to focus the stream on PeerTube stuff and show just like what I've been working on there. And then maybe we can just have like a general like working on Tuco Flyer stuff stream, because I haven't had one of those in a while and we need to have some more of those. Oh, cool. Lars says that they just made a Mastodon account so they could follow my PeerTube instance. That's cool. Thanks. So for anyone who's not familiar, like Mastodon is sort of like a decentralized social networking platform, which is similar to Twitter, but like not exactly like Twitter. It's sort of like if like Twitter and an email got together and made a child. It's an interesting system, and so it's more like instead of having a single identity, you have an identity on your particular server, and then your server federates with other servers and exchanges messages. And it's a bit more like IRC in that regard, actually. If anybody remembers IRC, what is Tuco doing? Okay, Tuco is chewing on his tail. I was making sure he wasn't chewing on HDMI cables. When I'm driving the winch around all the way on this side of the room, the winch behind me in that corner is really close to the low end of its force limit. I think one thing I might do to make the winch easier to drive in these cases is actually to add a little bit of counterweight to the cords kind of close to the flyer, and that might help. The other thing I really want to do is add some low power mode support, because right now I have to often turn, like anytime I want to use the robot, I'm always turning on and off the computer vision completely manually by just like killing the OBS process and restarting it. And if I had some more automatic control for the computer vision starting and stopping, then I could leave Tuco Flyer running without it just burning hundreds of watts of electricity that it doesn't need to be. Oh, and say thanks for stopping by, everybody in chat, Lars and Alex and Game of Knowing. It's nice to see all the familiar folks. And yeah, it's interesting trying out new platforms, but I don't plan on leaving Twitter completely. I don't plan on leaving YouTube, but I'm excited to have other platforms in parallel. I'm not like cross-posting everything between Twitter and Mastodon. So far, I'm just enjoying kind of using them for different purposes. But yeah. Oh, interesting. Benjamin's wanting to know if the secret with Mastodon is finding a good instance, and if so, do you have any suggestions? Yeah, well, the instance is definitely important. The instance is kind of like your local neighborhood. Like, you could certainly live in one place and, like, commute elsewhere and, like, hang out with other people, because, like, being on one instance, you can still follow people from other instances. You can still, like, message people from other instances. But I guess the two things that I think your local instance really has a bearing on are, so Mastodon has a local timeline where, so you see, like, your home timeline pretty much like Twitter was before they added algorithmic timeline. So it's just the people you follow in order. But then Mastodon also has additional timelines. It has a local timeline and a federated timeline. And local is all the public posts on your server. And then federated is all the public posts on all the servers, which you can imagine gets kind of large. And yeah, so your instance will change your local timeline, which if you use it, which you might want to, because it's kind of like a nice way to find people on your local instance. Like, it's like an opportunity to have a neighborhood community. Like, a lot of people don't really know their neighbors and don't like their neighbors, but like if you do like your neighbors, then it's kind of cool. So it's sort of like that. And then maybe the bigger thing is that the instance you choose, that's really your moderators and your admins. So that's you choosing who you're going to trust to like moderate abuse complaints, to back up your data, to make sure your server is available anytime you want it to be. So it's like an important responsibility, and it's certainly not something to take lightly. And certainly some instances are going to be worse at one or more of those things than Twitter, but then some instances are going to be better, at least in ways that you care about. So, for example, there are some instances that have like no moderation policy whatsoever. There are some instances that have like really detailed moderation policies. And then you end up having these like meta instance politics where like if you're an instance that has like a really detailed moderation policy, then you don't necessarily want to connect your instance with other instances that are really in conflict with that policy. So there's like some wiggle room, but then some room where like, well, maybe the instance that's like, really into one thing, maybe just like wants to completely block the instance that's really into this other opposing thing. So and so, like, yeah, I think it's worth keeping a lot of that in mind and, like, paying attention to how it's done, being involved with your instance. And it's like, really kind of, like, an open question, just, like, how well that stuff is going to work. Like, what if once things get, like, 10 times as large as they are right now, or 100 times? But then I think there's the potential for things to scale much better than they currently do, because right now when more users join Twitter, for example, you're not necessarily adding more like community managers and admins, or you are adding like internal like software admins, but you're not adding people who moderate the site in a way that actually like involves users or users' needs necessarily, whereas a well-run instance at least could do that. Hey Tuco, that's not food. But yeah, you could also have an instance that's run by somebody who doesn't care and just like does it all for the lulz and just like thinks everything is fine, and then maybe you just want to block that whole instance and move on with your life and not interact with them. So yeah, and I think part of the problem with YouTube is like anything they do applies to all of YouTube. So whether it's like they want to block somebody who, you think they really should block, or whether they want to block somebody you really shouldn't block, there's no opportunity for you to challenge that policy, really. There's no opportunity for you to just, like, go and take your content and your friends and join something different. So there's that. And yeah, I mean, that can work in pretty much any way, any direction. Like, you see sites that are like, we're like YouTube for people who got kicked off of YouTube for being like too hateful and violent. And like, those sites are terrible, and you probably just want to stay away from them and make sure that your PeerTube instance doesn't interface with them, or, you know, whatever like software they're running. I haven't seen anything that bad on PeerTube, but like, there's certainly stuff that isn't great on PeerTube, and like, I would just want to block them. Yeah, but as far as like choosing a home instance, like, it's not like the easiest thing to move around, but it's not the hardest either, and people do. If you move instances, then there's no automatic way to have everyone follow you at the new instance. So if you really care about like optimizing your social media experience and preserving follower counts and metrics and, you know, engagement and everything, then like that's maybe a downside. But I would argue that maybe that's the wrong thing to care about. And like in practice, people, there's an automatic way of setting up basically a forwarder that, so that if somebody visits your profile on the old instance, it says like, hey, they moved, maybe you should follow them there. And then you personally, you can export your data and the people you're following and then import that stuff into a different instance. So it's not perfect, but I think it's actually kind of nice. And, you know, so like in fact, like I've already like, just like rage quit one instance and joined another one without even importing and exporting my stuff, and like, it's not a big deal. I try not to keep, to like treat it as like a collection, like an aggregation game, but to just treat it as a way to meet people maybe and to have an interesting experience. Oh, cool. Kitlith is taking a more a simpler approach to picking an instance, and that seems to have worked out. Oh yeah, I guess, you know, it's one thing that happens when you're setting up web services is setting up services for outgoing email is annoying. I have not set that up yet for my PeerTube server, but I really should. I'm probably gonna have to ask, well, I need to figure out whether I'm setting up the email on the same domain, and if so, I need to get reverse DNS for that domain. If I'm setting up elsewhere, I need to figure out which elsewhere, and then figure out how I actually talk to it, for example. So there's that. Carter on Twitch is asking whether Mastodon is closer to a Twitter-esque Usenet news groups as opposed to, I guess, email. Yeah, probably. I guess what I meant with email is that it's something where, you know, you have separate servers which aren't necessarily run by individuals, but are run by like some organization, which is more than an individual, but less than the entire network. And that when you communicate to someone, that server forms part of their identity. I guess that's the familiar part of email that I wanted to evoke. But it's also true that there are a lot of services that work that way, especially in the pre-centralized internet, before everyone just assumed that your one username worked everywhere because the host name was just implied. So yeah. And people do call this re-decentralizing the internet, because this is how things used to work, and it's kind of only as of the kind of cloud web 3.0 boom or whatever that really centralized web services really took off and displaced the less centralized services that a lot of us are used to. Just briefly catching up on chat. Oh, oh, George is fine. Yeah, no, George is giving me a hard time for being social. Yeah, way to punish the behavior you want to see. It's fine. Yeah, no, I do have trouble being social, just in general, and I feel like it's been just kind of hard to pull myself away from just doing the behind-the-scenes work sometimes lately. So I have been spending a lot of time just editing video and doing sysadmin stuff and setting stuff up in the shop, and but yeah, I'm here now, so that's the current state of things. Oh yeah, so this camera is doing a great job hanging out with Tuco, but I do want to briefly show you the server, and we'll check it out online, but there it is in MeetSpace. It is currently not closed, which is maybe slightly embarrassing, but that's the way it is. I decided I was a bit impatient, you know, and I was interested in getting the system set up before all the parts I actually needed had arrived. So I was still waiting on some power cables I needed to get all the disks attached. And I wanted to put in, So as far as the disk setup, I've got a system disk, which is 2 mirrored SSDs, and then I've got a cluster of storage disks, which is ZFS with pairs of mirrored spinning disks. And so I just grabbed all the 4 terabyte disks I could spare from the rest of the shop. And so that came out to 8 4 terabyte disks. So my plan is for it to have mirrored pairs of 4 terabyte disks, giving it a total of 16 terabytes of usable video storage. And that'll be on ZFS. It is on ZFS. And because I set this up without all the power cables I needed, there's only 1 mirrored pair in there right now. So I've got to take it down for maintenance soon and do a couple things, including adding the other 3 mirrored pairs. And I didn't have the second SSD when I was setting it up, but I wanted to kind of get the system scaffolded out the way I wanted it. So I mirrored an SSD with a spinning disk, and I'm just going to swap out the spinning disk for an SSD. So that SSD is that thing on the table, and that's also scheduled for the next maintenance, whenever that is. So yeah. And it is running Debian. It's kind of nice. It's been a long time since I've set up a Debian machine. I'm kind of used to running Linux and VMs these days, and running Ubuntu on the physical machines. And so, yeah, I'm pretty happy with this. We've got decent storage and bandwidth here, and right now the bottleneck is transcoding, but I was just doing a bunch of hacking around to try to get it to at least utilize all the CPU capacity for transcode. So now I've got 3 concurrent FFmpeg processes that are each set to 8 threads, and that seems to just be barely actually maxing out all the logical CPUs on this thing. Oh, the pillows. Those are sandbags. I just wanted to weight down the cover. Let me actually open that up. Have the camera. I'm not going to bother putting on the wireless microphone, so you won't be able to hear me, but I'll just take that off and be right back. Yeah, so it's basically just a 4U box full of SATA cables. Like, my other rack is pretty much made of HDMI cables, and this thing is made of SATA cables. Oh, I'm having a little trouble driving this because it keeps... There's a bug, which I should really catalog in the bug tracker at this point, where there's a kind of an error detector for the gimbal that tends to have false positives. Yeah, there you go. So that's the website right there. Sorry for the shaking, it'll stabilize in a sec. But yeah, so 8 spinning disks. That one that's sitting on the top will become a SATA, or will become an SSD, and then there's another SSD kind of hidden right under that. And the motherboard is the one that used to be in my editing workstation, so it's kind of a not great Dell motherboard with not a lot of expansion. So I threw in a couple of SATA cards to have more SATA. There's also a pretty puny NVIDIA GPU in there, but it should be recent enough to do transcoding all right. So right now that's not actually helping with the transcodes because the software doesn't support it, but I filed an issue on that and I might actually be able to work on that soon. So I'd like this to support hardware transcoding, but right now that's all happening on the CPU. Intel, oh, Debian doesn't have Intel's latest microcode fix. Oh, that's interesting. I assume that's for a local vulnerability, though. I mean, the other thing I spent a bunch of time on, which is harder to show you because it's kind of all over the shop and involves like admin interfaces that I don't necessarily want to pull up on stream, but I've been doing a bunch of network infrastructure work to actually get this connected to the outside world in a way that doesn't impact the rest of the network here. So that's been interesting. I got to learn about NAT hairpin routing and the nuances of configuring, you know, the router gear that I'm using. So that was fun. Makes me want to slurp coffee just thinking about that. But yeah, so I've got fiber here, which is the connection that I'm streaming to you on right now. But part of why I'm able to bring you this beefy PeerTube server without paying data center costs is that I'm just hosting it here. And so right now it's just sitting in the middle of the lab, obviously not a great place for the server, but I have a UPS and another smaller rack on the way. I already have a rack here. This rack is basically full. It's full of video gear. But I have some space in the closet, so I'm going to set up a small rack and just set up this machine, UPS, and a little bit of network gear in there. Yeah, I could walk you through the networking stuff and show you some charts for sure. I don't necessarily want to show you like my actual firewall rules, just in case there's like a subtle bug. I'd rather someone like who can send me a direct request tell me about it than just like somebody random on the internet, but I'm pretty sure it's good. Yeah, I've got basically 4 separate networks here. Is that right? So there's the actual internet connection. So like globally routable IPs, and then there's like an internal shop network, which is intended to be somewhat private. Like, you know, I try to keep the stuff on there pretty secure anyway, but like I don't want just like random unauthenticated people even being able to send packets onto that network. So like I try to keep that one pretty private, but that's also just like the one that you access at most of the physical ports around here. There's a VLAN that's sort of nested inside of that I use for like guest Wi-Fi and stuff that I want to be even more isolated. And so those are routed separately by the router and not interpreted by anything else. Yeah, what else? So then there's the WAN, public IPs. So the new thing I added was a perimeter network, which some people call a DMZ or a demilitarized zone network. I thought I would have a name for it that's less violent, so perimeter network it is. This is the network which, for some people, the perimeter network is globally routable. My perimeter network is behind NAT on all sides, really. It's like an isolated network that has internet access, so it can like request stuff from outside to do like updates and whatever, and to talk to other federated hosts. And I can reach that network from my private network for doing like administration tasks, but that network can't access my private networks at all. And that network is also the routing target for port 80 and port 443 on the global IP on my router. So when you connect to the external router, everything's firewalled off except 80 and 443. When you connect to 80 and 443, those get forwarded through destination NAT back to the peripheral network, which is what this box is on. And so once you're in this box, so like let's say you did break into this box, let's say there is like a critical remote code execution vulnerability in PeerTube or something, you could have root on this box, but you wouldn't have access to the rest of the network. You'd have to find a pretty awful vulnerability in my router that you could exploit using just regular IP packets for that, probably. What kind of networking hardware do you use? I've got just like a bunch of like consumer unmanaged switches, but the thing that I've got doing the routing is Ubiquiti Edge router, which seems like a decent piece of hardware. I had something a little bit simpler and like more Soho routery previously, but I had to upgrade when I got the fiber here because that router could not keep up with gigabit fiber. So the Ubiquiti router manages to keep up with gigabit, it seems, without running out of CPU. You can certainly run it out of CPU if you query it over SNMP too frequently, but yeah, I mean, it's basically just like a nice front end around a fast Linux-based router, so that's what I've been using here. Yeah, Ubiquiti gear is pretty good. The Edge router is still kicking, doing nicely. I used to have a Ubiquiti Wi-Fi access point, but it died on me, and it's in my project bin because I want to do a post-mortem and figure out what's wrong with it. But yeah, I don't know what happened to that. And the router I replaced it with is not Ubiquiti. It's like not as nice of a router, but yeah, I might try to get the old router working again because I kind of miss that one sometimes. Alright, well anyway, I think I'm caught up on chat and I lost my train of thought for whatever else was next. I think I was going to show you actually PeerTube and not just a picture of the server, because while a picture of the server is kind of interesting, it looks like every other server that's full of disks, really. Alright, so PeerTube. Actually, what is PeerTube? If you just Google for PeerTube, this Join PeerTube site has a pretty decent intro. And in fact, this What is PeerTube video is, I think, what I was looking for, because this is hosted on PeerTube. That was going to be really loud, wasn't it?
What is PeerTube? PeerTube is an open source
That's not too bad.
platform, like YouTube.
So if you click this, it goes to their PeerTube instance, which is Framasoft's. Framasoft is this French open source nonprofit that produces PeerTube. They seem to be pretty awesome.
It empowers you to be more than a user.
So, let's see, this is...
You can make the web yours by
We can watch this
installing
together.
PeerTube.
We could be the MST3K. This is...
PeerTube instances can sync.
Yeah, this is attribution share
Now
alike.
Tube chooses to sync with DocTube. All of DocTube videos can be watched on NowTube.
Oh yeah.
Files stays on DocTube
Yeah,
server,
this is a pretty good
while being
intro.
streamed seamlessly to NowTube.
Because like each server is responsible for kind of its own little universe. It has a front end, it has a file server back end. So this is maybe a good time to mention the difference between this being decentralized versus distributed. We can find this popular graph or picture, right? Yeah. So PeerTube is this, not this. I think a lot of people would like to see something that's more distributed for hosting videos, but I think the problem with that kind of system is, well, if you look at this, you've only got connections to a few nearby nodes, which means that you only have direct access to videos that are on a few nodes. So that's fine if you're trying to get like really pervasive access to like a small number of resources. Like this might work really well for sharing, I don't know, like the current time maybe, or like a news feed or something. But if you, let's say you're trying to think about serving this long tail of videos where you want a lot of content, maybe some things that are popular, but a lot of things that don't get accessed as frequently, but you still want access to. With the fully distributed approach, then you'd have to somehow find a route through these nodes to get the content, or all the nodes would have to start mirroring that long tail of content. Whereas decentralized, the idea is you still have these things which are kind of silos. They're a place that holds data. They have some kind of administrative and moderation resource associated with them. So just like a Mastodon instance, you would trust your PeerTube instance to hold your data and to take backups and to not allow, content that you think is extremely objectionable on the server maybe, and to just like keep your data safe. And I think that's a pretty good trade-off, because like right now we're over here on centralized, and that is convenient in some ways. It's got maybe a potential for the worst actors on the system to be less bad, but it also means that kind of no matter who you are, you're really stuck with whoever's in the center, kind of having their way with the network. And so decentralized, you have several different centers. There's no, one single place where you control all the power in the network. But then there's this kind of meta power in the way that those different centers are connected together. So I think it's pretty cool.
This federation approach
How are they
creates a video
explaining
network
this?
with shared video catalog without paying for more disk space. This is the base of the web.
Yeah, and the shared video catalog is interesting
You
too.
don't need it.
Because right now there aren't really fine-grained tools for moderating like what content ends up on what instances. Like you can pretty much subscribe to like all the content on one instance will be visible in your instance's video catalog. And so there are a lot of like general purpose instances. Right now it seems like there are a handful of instances on PeerTube that just subscribe to every instance they can, and just like catch all instances. Then there are a bunch that are like manually curated to some extent, but still seem to be pretty big in general purpose. With the one that I'm running, I'm kind of trying to see if I can curate it based on subject, and I'm still not really sure how this really interfaces with the moderation strategies that are available in PeerTube itself. So far what I'm having to do is just only federate with other only choose to subscribe to other servers' video indexes where they're kind of all on topic for my server. Which seems kind of extreme. It'd be nice if I could subscribe to the video index itself, but then only actually show content that matches certain tags or something. So, moderation is a big area where, like, PeerTube has a lot of room for improvement, and a lot of stuff is being worked on right now, so I'm not too worried about that, but it's something I'm interested in tracking. Oh yeah, the Colorado flag. Yeah, this comes from Kate, Kate Demkin, who's often in chat. Yeah, she gave me this shirt. She lives in Colorado, and she made it as a combination of the Colorado flag and the open source hardware logo. And yeah, I used to live in Colorado. It's where I grew up, but I've been here in California for a long time now. I have not heard of DTube. I'll have to check that out. I'm familiar with IPFS. The thing, that's interesting. The thing that I would expect to be more difficult about building a video streaming site directly on top of IPFS is that if you really are trying to, to just like completely decentralize the storage rather than, I was going to talk about the storage in just a sec, but I would expect that to be a little slower for the video to actually start streaming. So I'd be interested to see what the performance is like, but I'll check that out. So yeah, with PeerTube, what's interesting is the peer in the name. It's interesting. There's almost two ways to think about it. It's almost like it's fundamentally a peer-to-peer service, but then there's like this mega peer that is the web server. And so you're downloading the video as a torrent, but there's basically a root of the torrent that's served by the web server, a web root over HTTP. And so in practice, what this really looks like when you're hitting a video is your browser is making a bunch of tiny HTTP requests and downloading it from the server. It looks a lot like any other video streaming service, but because it's built where like that server streaming is kind of a special case of the peer-to-peer streaming, it seemed to pretty easily, in theory at least, be able to expand to downloading that video from lots of peers when one video gets popular or when like a collection of videos gets popular. So that seems cool. It's like, personally, I'm kind of interested to see how this works out once things get bigger too, because right now, a lot of PeerTube servers, I don't really see any other peers. It's just the web root. But I don't know, like the WebTorrent folks, who this is based on WebTorrent. So if you've heard of that, this is using the same technology. PeerTube is basically the like social and database layer and web layer like on top of WebTorrent. So, there's a WebTorrent demo. Is that on the main WebTorrent site? And that actually is pretty compelling. It just shows, admittedly not a very large file. It's like 100 megabytes of video, but it shows it coming from a lot of different peers, and it's kind of nice. Was that just... I thought it was webtorrent.io, but yeah, this is it. So look at that, all these peers. And so it's not that big of a file, but like it's a pretty nice demo, just showing this working pretty easily. And it seems like if but one reason I'm skeptical is that there are like half of a dozen videos that are really popular as demos right now, and I'm wondering if I don't know, like how well that would scale once there is like a different ratio, but I don't know. I'm really optimistic. Like there's this part of me that is like looking for like problems, partly because problems could be interesting things to work on, but there's also just like a lot to really like about the way that this technology is going, and that's part of why I'm pretty excited about participating in it. So yeah, PeerTube. And so this thing here, this is a PeerTube instance. This is run on fromatube.org, but any other PeerTube instance that follows this one, you could find this video on that instance. It would be indexed by that instance, but when you view it, the web root that you're using is still on fromatube.org. So, it's not like you're mirroring the content of everyone else in the network. I think there might be some mirroring in the plan in the future, because that could be a really nice feature, but it's certainly not required, and it's not like you have to mirror everything that's listed by your server. So, and then there's this list of instances. I think by default it's sorted with newest registrations on top, maybe. So here's mine, diode.zone. I was going to make it kind of electronics-ish themed. I'm still figuring out exactly how to describe it, but I kind of want it to focus on sort of, not necessarily just electronics, but kind of hardware or maker or physical world kind of things, which I don't want it just to be like electrical engineering, but maybe more of like physical things, including like making and crafting and stuff like that. And I'm not going to like be really hardline on the policy for that. Like, I think it's probably useful if, let's say you have a library of like electronics videos. Maybe we want a couple videos about you and your cat or your parakeet or whatever. Like, I think that's cool. Like, I think that's healthy, but you know, I want to figure out how to scope it so that it's got enough of a topic centralization that it can grow an interesting community without it, you know, without having to like police the content all the time, you know. So yeah, there's a bunch of instances. You can see how many local videos are on each instance. You can see some seem to have a lot of storage space. This one I think has a lot of videos because they have no upload quota. I'm kind of curious what kind of hardware it's running on. You can see how many instances a particular thing is being followed by. So I'm currently not following anyone. That's because of what I was mentioning, that right now you get all of their content listed, and so if I wanted to have more of a like topic curation, I'm not quite sure how to achieve that. But if there are any other instances that have a completely compatible topic, then I could just follow that entire instance. So, and then here's what I've got so far. You're welcome to try it out. I think I'm still considering the server pretty experimental because obviously it's sitting on the desk with the case open, and I'm going to need to do at least one more like maintenance downtime to finish setting up the disks and to get it moved into a proper rack. But you know, if you want to play with it, by all means try it out and just kick the tires, send your friends links, just see if it's fast. You know, tell me what it works on and what it doesn't work on. Yeah, so, I mean, right here, I'm accessing these videos via my local network connection, but I've been testing it a lot through my cellular and through NATs, or through VPNs and stuff like that. I think, yeah, and I've been trying to get just my whole archive of content in here. Right now, the bottleneck is transcode speed, because I do need to run FFmpeg several times on each video that goes into this machine. But I've been trying to optimize that a little bit. Yeah, and then there's some Mastodon / ActivityPub integration. So if you're on Mastodon or any other ActivityPub compatible social network, you can follow this account here. So @scanlime @diode.zone, and then my videos as they show up on here will end up in your activity feed if you want that. One thing that I think is really cool is that replies to those videos on Mastodon end up directly in here. Where did we already end up seeing some of that? Is that on this video? Yeah, some of you may have noticed if you're... Sorry, that's a little loud. Let's turn that down. Here, beginning of streams, or if you watch them in the archive, that I've got a little challenge here if you've got some hardware. Let's mute that for now. So yeah, you can stream at all these different resolutions. And yeah, comment bridge. So right now I'm just kind of testing this and seeing how well it works for my videos, but I'm pretty interested in developing software, but also just developing a community maybe. So if you're interested, if you think the decentralized web is worth investing a little bit of time into, and most importantly, you have some videos which are kind of physical making / reversing adjacent, or even, you know, I say physical, but I guess I want to include like low-level software or even just like kind of maybe just software in general in that too. So just, I feel like I don't want to make the topic overly narrow at this point, but I want to try to have something that's more about like creative stuff. And so maybe it also includes art, maybe it includes more like kind of physical fabrication, maybe it includes like computery stuff, all of the above. So if you have content like that and it's Creative Commons, if you have content like that and it's Creative Commons licensed, or you would be happy to relicense it or make it available to Creative Commons, then I would love to give you an invite to just try out the server. It's not like 100% ready. I think at the very least I want to let the transcode queue die down a little bit, because right now it's very, very overfull. But yeah, if you want access to this, drop me, what's the best way? Maybe like an email or a DM on Twitter, or a notification on Twitter, or a message on Mastodon, or anything like that. And I'll try to get back to all of you once the server is at a slightly more stable point. I think the milestone I'm going to set up is that it's in the rack on a UPS and has offsite backups, and then I'll start handing out logins. So, and yeah, and if you don't want to log in, just like try it out. Let me know if it works, if it's fast. Send your friends links. If you put a link in a Twitter, like a Twitter post, it should embed a card that you can play the video in. That should be working. So yeah. And then if you haven't heard of it, Mastodon is pretty interesting. I would definitely suggest, like, if you're interested in social media / microblogging / whatever, but you don't like being stuck on Twitter and or Facebook, then this is maybe something you'd want to be interested in. Oh yeah, Blender. Blender has a great PeerTube instance. This is maybe the most popular PeerTube instance right now. So if you just go to one of the main kind of PeerTube sites, so like peertube.social, this is a pretty big instance that subscribes to pretty much everything. And if you search for Blender on here, then some of these just have Blender in the name, because like a lot of people post their Blender renderings. I don't know if you can search for a user yet. There's definitely still a lot in the way of like just UI for some of this stuff that is still work in progress. Let's see, so here's a Blender movie. Let's just search for this by title on a different PeerTube instance. Oh, is that not on here? I wonder why that isn't showing up. I want to dig into more about how search works, because I don't know if search works that well. Okay, so here we can find that by title on a couple of servers. Fromatube has their own server. Here's another random server in France, and then here's Blender's official server. And so, like, if I was to click on the video on each server, it would, like, even though I'm on peertube.social, the UI would be served from peertube.social, but my browser would be grabbing the video directly from those original sites. So, like this. And then from here, I'm not logged in right now, but if I was logged in on peertube.social, I could actually like the video or comment on it from here, and that would all integrate with the original video on video.blender.org. This is a little slower than it usually starts up. Trying to do 720. Just maybe check my internet connection, make sure you aren't overwhelming me. This seems fine. So this is just outgoing network bandwidth. Here's my live stream. Here's, I assume, some of you accessing the server. Yeah, that is the server. This is Grafana, by the way, if you haven't seen it. It's a pretty nice user interface for graphing InfluxDB data. Alright, I don't know why this video is taking a while to load. Is this... Oh, it works if I reload it. I guess that was just a fluke. If I seek, is it fast? Pretty fast. Yeah. So like that's like more of what I'd expect. Similarly with like if I search for my own videos on here, I should find them. In fact, some of these are duplicates because I uploaded them to locally here to peertube.social, as well as you can find them on Diode Zone. So this will be hosted on peertube social. This is coming from, I honestly don't even actually know where peertube.social is hosted. Does it tell you on the about? Oh, Germany. Right? Yeah. So this is coming from Germany right now. But then, if I hit this, for example, it's coming from my local network. So, yeah. Let me know if you have any questions on that. I can't think of anything else to mention right at the moment. I'm trying to get my whole backlog in here, but it's a lot of videos to transcode, so it might take a while. But I think it's nice to both have a home for these videos that is not on YouTube, because that has not been remotely practical until now. It would just be way too many videos to upload all of these to Vimeo. Like there's no Vimeo plan that would hold them. And what else? I mean, I guess I could look at other like kind of third-party sites, but just like the quantity of video I have is kind of huge, and so self-hosting it seemed like a good option to experiment with at least. $271 gigabytes so far. There's a drop-down box for selecting the quota for new users, and the biggest option in that drop-down is 50 gigabytes. The biggest other than unlimited, rather. Yeah. It's easy to have multiple channels, which is cool. So I've got an uploader script that's been grabbing videos from YouTube and stuffing them in the live stream archives. I've been manually uploading my editing masters to the main series here. Oh yeah, Alex was saying neat that I've got 1080p 60 on PeerTube, because a lot of PeerTube is 480p. Yeah, I mean, so PeerTube itself handles 1080p videos just fine. I think why you see a lot of lower quality video on YouTube or on PeerTube is just because a lot of the servers have smaller upload and bandwidth limits, and so you do see people just uploading smaller videos to stay under the quota. And that's part of why, like, I mean, basically, if I want a good way to back up this content and have it on a file server, and I've got a fast internet connection here, I might as well make the file server accessible to all of you. That's one way to look at it, right? And yeah, it is nice to have the lower quality transcode sometimes, because like if I'm watching on my phone, for example, it's nice to have it just quickly start up with a 480p stream or something. And you can do 240. Look at all those pixels. Why is it not starting the 240 stream?
YouTube of new, you can watch.
Sometimes the player seems to have trouble switching streams. Although it's weird, like I have not seen this on my own server. I've seen a pretty smooth experience so far, but I mean, that could likely just be because I have a really good connection to my own server. So, yeah, let me know what you think. There's some good instances here. You could also browse around and, you know, there's going to be some terrible content and some good content. But, yeah, I was hoping to find some other stuff that's maybe, like, similar, like, topic-wise that I could follow. There was something I saw recently that was kind of electrical engineering related. was it? I think it was near the top in the default sort. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you could spend a while taking a safari around here and trying to find interesting stuff. That might be fun to do sometime. Probably not on stream. Yes, there's the Blender instance. Huh. I thought I had seen another one that was kind of electrical engineering related. That one, I'm not seeing it on a list. Maybe I'm spacing out which one it is. But anyway, let's move on. Network seems happy. How's the robot? Oh yeah, so I mean, there's definitely going to be a bit of a delay in loading the video, no matter what. I think there's probably some room for optimization in terms of maybe starting to stream the headers from a lower bandwidth version of the video while you're loading a higher bandwidth version. It does seem like there's a higher startup time for longer videos. So if you're clicking on like a 4-hour video, then it takes a lot longer to load the header of that video to get to the very beginning of it than it would if you were just loading the beginning of a shorter video. So yeah, I've been trying to keep track of all the different potential sources for that slowdown. That's interesting. You can see a difference in the graph here for when the overlay on Tuco Flyer shows additional stuff on it. So like, I think this is when the tracking was active and it was showing the little marching cats and little cat sprites are in the tracking region. Alright, well maybe we can try to think about that. That potential milestone for adding like the ability to turn on and off computer vision. So in the architecture, there's kind of a server. So we're switching gears a little bit. I was talking about decentralized web video stuff, and I'm going to talk about this camera robot, the one that I've been driving around. Let's go back to hanging out with Tuco. This server is kind of boring. You know what the server looks like now. I do really like the graphing with the Grafana dashboard. I could just hang out in there all day, maybe. Actually, I haven't looked at the power graphs recently. You know, and it might also be far enough into the stream that I could see if the bot has posted a screenshot successfully on Mastodon. Oh, it looks like it has. Oh no, that was the original. Right, I think it posts the first screenshot at 90 minutes in. So we still got another 30 minutes to go. That's fine. But it did do the initial announcement, which I hadn't checked. Yeah, the problem, so last stream was the first stream where I was using the new Mastodon-capable announcement bot, and I had a silly permissions problem, which was preventing it from starting. It turns out that it was trying to write to a log file, which was owned by a user that wasn't it. I just had to change that. Yeah, I definitely got to make sure that Diode Zone is cool with cat videos, because I do have a separate category in my account. So like you can make multiple channels easily. So I've got Scanlime at Diode Zone, and then there's main edited videos, and then there's streams. I have another one that's just cat videos. Extra content, I think it called it, but it's basically cat videos. Oh yeah, Alex picked up one of those TP-Link power dongles. Yeah, those are useful. They're easy to script now that the protocol has been kindly reverse engineered and documented by some folks. Category, yes. Good call. All right. I think we need to go back to the Windows machine for this. Okay. This is the Windows streaming computer. Oh. Yeah, okay. And as much as I don't usually like doing development on the computer that's actually doing the video encoding, that's how this Tuco Flyer project has been rolling, so. Let's try to get reoriented. Like, it's been a while since I worked on this part of the project. Gosh, this video looks really washed out. Like there's a problem with the dynamic range on the HDMI. Okay, so this is the part that's running the computer vision. This is an instance of OBS, the open source streaming platform. I'm really close to bumping into that thing, as you might have noticed. I'm less close than it looks on the camera, but... Yeah. I was gonna show off those graphs, wasn't I? Keep getting distracted. A little easier to get to those on here. Alright, so we were looking at the traffic graph. Look at this, diode zone's pretty empty right now. That's some video streaming. Yeah, so AC power. So that, I guess, is the beginning of the stream. Streaming is a little bit power hungry. Causes the voltage to sag a bit. What's this little one? Yeah, you can really get into a habit of trying to understand every single load here. So like some of these seem to correspond to CPU usage on a particular machine. You can see which machines have more power hungry CPUs, right? Because this is a little NAS, so it could be on like 40% CPU and you don't even see it on the power. But like, this is, I think, a dual Xeon machine. So it goes up to like 20% CPU and you see 50 watts on the graph. Yeah. And this one, you can see a little bit of that. Yeah. And this is when the actual stream starts. You can see the color burst is the encoder machine. It goes up from 8% CPU to like 50%. And this is a different machine waking up. This is the one that I use to monitor the chat usually. And then does that go up even higher once I turn on the computer vision, or was the computer vision already on? I think the computer vision must have been on. I might have started the computer vision at about the same time as the stream, actually. So maybe that's what that was. But yeah, data, right? It's fun to look at. The voltage data especially, right? Because this is influenced by, I'm sure, all sorts of stuff that is happening outside my control. It's also fun testing the UPS with these graphs on. You see the power go to 0 for a little while and then spike really high for a little while as the UPS recharges. Oh yeah, the power usage. I should mention where this is actually coming from. Good call. I put the code for this on GitHub. I'm using these. This is something that I could have made a video thing about, but I decided to just make it an infrastructure project and be done with it. So I haven't really, I didn't do this work on stream. This is what I made. So, as I mentioned, I already had InfluxDB and Grafana set up for this infrastructure you're seeing here. Some people call that the tick stack. Except I'm replacing Chronograph with a different project called Grafana because it seems to be a little better for my needs, but it's basically this. I'm using InfluxDB and Telegraph. So Telegraph is a monitoring daemon that grabs data from like standard stuff like your CPU's temperature sensor and your router's, interface counters. So I've got that running for stuff like that, but I also have some things talking directly to InfluxDB. So the graph's coming from Tuco Flyer. This is Tuco Flyer talking directly to InfluxDB and sending high frequency data. That's why I get stuff that's got a granularity of much less than a second here. I guess this is only half a second, but some of the stuff is pretty frequent. Oh yeah, see, this is every 100 milliseconds. You're not going to get 100 millisecond data granularity if you go through Telegraph, but sending stuff directly to InfluxDB, this is easy. Anyway, I would have been happy to have Telegraph monitor the HS110, but I was just looking for something easy, and so I found this Git repo, so by C. Garnier, I guess, 7 months ago. And it looks like this person was running a Bitcoin mining rig. Because if you look at their defaults, reporter.js, yeah, they've got the default database hard-coded to minersDB. Whatever. I think that's kind of funny. And so I'm using this TP-Link HS11. This is not a very secure device. It's got local interface with pretty much no authentication. It's got a cloud interface, which does seem to be reasonably secure. And you can also disable the cloud interface. And they've got an iOS and Android app that lets you turn on and off the relay and monitor the instantaneous power. But they don't have their own graphing solution, and it seemed like, obviously this is really interesting data. I want this in my time series database. So I was Googling around, somebody had already written this. It seemed okay, like I could have used this, but this would have been really annoying to monitor a big pile of these with, because I would have needed several instances of this NPM process. So I made a small modification where you give it your InfluxDB info, but then it actually does auto discovery on the network and just looks for all the IP addresses that seem like HS110 devices and collects data from all of them. That was pretty easy to do. It's just this commit. So updating the documentation a little bit, adding alias to the schema. That's the human readable name that you set up for each of the monitoring devices in the TP-Link app, which seems like a decent thing to identify them with in the database. So alias, adding that out of the sysinfo here, which is something I'm grabbing from the individual device. And then just modifying this so that I can have a kind of one-to-many relationship between these reporters and actual HS110 instances. So I pass this query function a device instance. I pass log a sysinfo, which has information about the device that we're logging stuff for. And then when we start up, instead of going directly into getting a single device, I just modify that to do a discovery process. And then every time I find a device, I do basically that same startup and start an interval timer thing. So yeah, that was pretty straightforward. And yeah, this device is not expensive. That was part of why I got it. I think I found them on sale for like 10 or 15 bucks each. So a little more expensive still than some of the non-energy monitoring plugs that you'll find, but it seemed like a good price for a plug that had like a 15 amp current monitor built in. I've also been like feeling just like a little skeptical about, it's like, okay, it's rated for 15 amps. How much do I want this to like actually pull 15 amps continuously? So I've been like keeping an eye on them with the thermal camera and that kind of thing. They seem all right so far, but I've also been usually running it at more like 500 watts max. Where's the microwave flicking on? Where's that coming from? Oh, are you meaning like that's a thing that you could try graphing? Yeah, totally. I get that a little bit with some of the graphs I do have, like I have a network graph here, and like oh, what's that? Somebody was using the guest Wi-Fi, and like track down like who's on the guest Wi-Fi. It's like, oh, maybe that was my iPhone trying to download an update or something. So. Oh, that's cool. Alex actually grabbed one of these, or picked up one of these TP-Link devices. Yeah, they're pretty useful. And yeah, that's my little network infrastructure. It's been fun. And the Tuco Flyer data specifically has been really nice for debugging it. Nice and high res too, right? Like I can graph just the last 5 minutes and get... That's interesting. There's a bit of a period here. Oh, that's probably a beat frequency of something with the sampling interval of this graph interacting with the animation intervals of the rotating cat sprites. That's interesting. This stuff will actually change depending on what the camera is looking at. So if the camera is looking at different things, you can see the rectangle tracking quality metrics change. And this will of course change as the angle changes, but the camera's been kind of stationary. We've got a representation of the power level of all the gimbal motors, which I think is pretty fun. Oh yeah, you can also get AC power graphs for just the Tuco Flyer stuff. So like you might not even notice them, but like there's some little lines right down here. If I turn off the really big consumers here, like the entire equipment rack, we can see the individual Tuco Flyer things. So here's Tuco Flyer itself, the actual robot. So you can see where I turned it on, and then it was drawing 12 watts, and then this is turning on the gimbal, and then the gimbal power fluctuates depending on how the motors are being driven. And then I think I can shift-click the winches to add them. Yeah. So one thing you might not have, well, at least I found this slightly surprising. I mean, the idle powers on the winches, I'd been imagining those were like 10 watts. It's interesting that the Tuco Flyer itself consistently idles. I don't know, like, I guess these powers are not really that surprising, but like the 7 watts, it's not really doing anything useful with that power. Most of that is losses in the power supply itself. And I think that's partly because the winches have a much larger power supply, and it just doesn't have like a super low power mode for light loads, but it can handle the larger peak loads. And then Tuco Flyer has maybe a more efficient power supply itself, but then it's actually kind of doing more when it's idle. It's running a bunch of lasers and a camera. So, and then all of the robots are running microcontrollers that take maybe, you know, a fraction of a watt. Oh yeah, that's a good question about multiple account support for Mastodon. Yeah, I don't think they have it in the web front end yet, but I've heard other people ask for it. So I'm assuming there's something in the issue tracker about it. One workaround you can use for now is if you have accounts on multiple Mastodon servers, then you can just have those in different browser tabs. So then I'm curious, like, how much we actually see the winches change from the level of the AC graph as I move this around. Let's just try raising the robot up a bit. The winches have a pretty high peak power of like 60 watts or so, but their average power is pretty tiny. That might change once we start having support for kind of slow, continuous camera movements, which is a thing that I do want to be able to do. But when it's mostly stationary camera, then power is tiny. Definitely the highest power part of this is the GPU doing the computer vision. The algorithm that tries to keep the winch forces from going outside their limits occasionally just gets into the state where it's just like passing slack between the winches and causing the flyer to drift, and I think that's what was just happening. Yeah, that's cool. What was that, 45 watts, at least during whatever measurement interval this thing was measuring for? There's so many things we could choose to work on right now on Tuco Flyer. This is part of why it's hard to make progress, is the sort of choice paralysis. But I have to say, one thing that is specifically bothering me is that noise that you're hearing. Every time the flyer moves, there's this kind of like rattling noise. You hear that? I mean, I don't know if you can tell which noise is which right now. I'm kind of more used to telling them all apart. It kind of sounds like rolling a cat toy down a hill or something. You just heard it again. Yeah, so that's the counterweight kind of getting stuck on stuff. and there's this nylon cord. I should just actually point the camera up there instead of just talking into nothingness. Show, don't tell, etc. Oh, let's get a little shot of this while we're here. Oh yeah. What a good cat. Maybe I can move the flyer around with this camera angle so that you can kind of see what's going on and hear the noises associated with it. Oh yeah, the VFD is fun. I actually did a video on that earlier. Yeah, that was something I found at a surplus shop ages ago, and I turned it into kind of a set-top box thing. And then much more recently, I took that apart and then rebuilt it into a 3D printed sort of cash register looking thing that I can attach to my streaming machines. So there's a Linux box that I do stream transcoding on, and that is attached to the serial port on there. So I have a Python script that updates that with status. This white balance is really messing me up. I think I need to change it. It is really annoying to change the white balance on this camera. I think you have to switch from movie to still mode to do it. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Oh gosh, there's always some mode I'm missing with this camera in video mode. This is easier without the HDMI stuff. See, like this camera has a touchscreen, which has some controls on it that might be useful. See, like, okay, I need to know how to change the white balance with the HDMI connected, so let's see if I have a procedure here that works with the HDMI. So, press this button? Yeah, okay. So we have a gray. Yeah, I think we want this. It's close enough at least. But does that work in video mode? Oh, it does work in video mode. Okay. I just have to remember to press the button that is a Q in a box and not press the button that says white balance and not press the button that says menu or info, because neither of those help. It's the button with a Q in a box for some reason. Thanks, Canon. I remembered that making more sense for some reason. Okay, so that thing that I was talking about doing, watching the leash as I move the robot around, now that it isn't completely the wrong white balance. Oh, so that's maybe not the most useful view. Let's get maybe a view of the pulley mechanism itself also. This is probably useful footage, actually. I just might have to get a couple of different shots of this. So you can also see, like, the leash is not amazingly organized. It's a little tangly and stuff. I'm not sure how much of a problem that is. It doesn't seem to be a big deal yet. That twist is kind of annoying me, but the rest of it seems like it's all right. I need another gimbal cam to follow this gimbal cam, right? So you can see that kind of collapses and uncollapses. And it sort of makes some weird noises as it moves. The weird noises are not coming from this part of the leash, though. They're actually coming from the ceiling-mounted contraption up here. Oh, and we're sitting in exactly the wrong spot to see what's actually going on with that. It is still really hard to see what's going on there. There is a nylon monofilament line that's running alongside the leash. You can maybe just barely see the outline kind of above the black section of the leash if you're watching this full screen in 1080p. That's running alongside the actual part of the actual cord, and it's going through these clamps that are periodically on the cord, and then the clamps slide along that nylon. So that's what's actually accomplishing the kind of bunching up of the cords here. And that part seems to be doing fine. Is this an alright angle, actually? That kind of just looks like a floor now. The wall is now the floor. That's a better view. Okay. So that's still a pretty bad view of the actual pulley up there, but maybe you can see the gist of the arrangement. And then we've got this counterweight. Part of the problem, I think, is the counterweight is just too low. Like, I could certainly raise the counterweight and it would have fewer things to bump into. Yeah, like, it's hard to drive the Flyer into the corner hard enough such that the counterweight has any danger of hitting the top. So I could certainly decrease the length of that cord somewhat. But I don't want to bother with like a half solution like that. Anyway, the thing that was mostly annoying me was the sound, but it's also annoying me that the counterweight bumps into stuff. I think I want to solve both of those problems at once by redoing the way the pulley for the counterweight works and giving it some mechanical advantage, making it a compound pulley so that the counterweight can be heavier and on a shorter rope. Because if the counterweight has a compound pulley such that, say, you have like a 3-to-1 compound pulley system, so that you need to pull 3 times as much rope through that pulley system to move the counterweight by that same amount, then we can end up with the counterweight moving by a smaller amount, but then the counterweight can be heavier because that, if you're trying to kind of apply the same amount of force to that nylon line to keep it under tension, you can do that through the pulley system using a heavier weight. And that's actually good because right now the counterweight is really light, and I'd like it to be a little heavier. Yeah, it's like 100 grams or something. It's really small. So. Oh, Krista says that there's a mode for zebras and video shooting. Are you sure? I've looked for that. If there's zebra support for video on this camera, I'd love to see it. But as far as I know, this camera doesn't support it. I had zebras on this camera with Magic Lantern a while ago, but I don't run Magic Lantern anymore after it ate a couple of my SD cards. Oh, were you talking about Magic Lantern? Sorry, I missed that context. Yeah, okay, sorry. I'm reading chat backwards, and that's what I get. Yeah, no, I've experimented with Magic Lantern. I think the reason I tried it at first is I wanted better audio settings, actually. Because this camera just has terrible audio gain settings. And then, yeah, I think it had a histogram and zebras for video, and that was great, but yeah, I just lost a lot of footage, and that was the end of it. And then Schmid is asking if I have a flywheel anywhere. No. Should I? For storing energy or for the Tuco Flyer robots? I don't have a flywheel UPS. I have a couple of UPSs around here, but they all use lead-acid batteries. And Tuco Flyer doesn't have any flywheels. I can't really think of a reason why it would want a flywheel. Maybe for storing energy when you slow down, but I have a hard time imagining that being practical, but... Agenda says, decentralized web like that internet thing? Yeah, basically, right? Like, the whole idea behind the internet is that it was a decentralized network of computers. And, like, I mean, it's kind of weird because we sort of have this world which is at a technical level decentralized, but at a management and social level extremely centralized. And so part of what we're talking about is moving the like ownership and management and social side of that to a decentralized place also, so that we have computers around the world, but they're not all like owned by Google. They're all like owned by different people and they talk to each other. A flywheel as a damper. Okay, school me on that. How do you use a flywheel as a damper? I don't think I get that. Because I don't know how you use a flywheel to damp oscillations or get rid of energy. I think we might be talking about different things then. Okay, I think I'm going to go back to... yeah, well, okay, so there are a couple things we could do. We could use software. I was talking about making the video processing easier to turn on and off, so it uses less power, or there's less manual work involved in having it use less power. And then there's this leash thing, which I would really enjoy fixing. I kind of feel more like doing CAD right now, honestly, so maybe we can take a look at the leash stuff. I don't really feel like taking anything down from the ceiling right now, so let's maybe just look at the software side, or the I don't understand what the flywheel is for. Can you talk about what the context is? Sorry. Like, what are we smoothing out? What are we damping? Yeah, so I know what a flywheel is. I know how it works, I think. Just give me context. It's not the definition of the flywheel that I need, it's the why you're suggesting it. Alright, so I had been doing, I usually do my demo work for this stream on this one Mac Mini, but it's a little sluggish at running Fusion 360. We can try it, but last time I tried this, it was not a very good experience. How's our network doing? I'm like, is anybody stress testing the PeerTube server yet? I was like posting links to the server on Twitter, like just waiting for my internet to saturate or something, and it's like blip, blip, blip. I'm not really worried about bandwidth yet, unless it takes off significantly, because like it's just really hard to fill up a gigabit fiber connection. Even just trying to test the bandwidth around here. It's like you're not really just testing your bandwidth, you're testing some combination of your bandwidth and the other end's bandwidth. So like going to speedtest.net or whatever, it fluctuates a lot just depending on what server you're connecting to. Ananot says flywheels are fly, that's why. Well, you were right. I mean, no, I don't dispute flywheels are mega fun. Like we could totally just get into like flywheels and energy storage and whatever. I'm just kind of curious where the suggestion comes from. Like if it's related to stuff that's ongoing or if it's just a new project idea. Man, yeah, the perimeter network's just not really doing much. It's okay. Transcodes are keeping the server warm, if none of you will. Hello to anyone new to the stream. By the way, if you're wondering what I'm going off on, I spent like the first part of the stream talking about decentralized internet stuff and being excited about like ActivityPub and Mastodon and PeerTube. And I started actually trying to set up a PeerTube server to host my whole video library here. So that's what this diode.zone site is. I currently consider it experimental because it's in the middle of my shop without the side of the server on, and it doesn't have UPS or offsite backups or anything. But it's going to be a neat place maybe. And if you also have Creative Commons licensed electronics or making adjacent videos, then hit me up and I'll send you an invite when the server's ready. But in the meantime, you can just like browse it and test it and let me know how it works for you. So yeah. And then I'll be able to see how much bandwidth you're using right here. So far, not much. All right, what do we got? Why did it just open untitled? Where are my projects? Is that this thing? Yeah. Okay. So the canonical source for stuff in this project is not Fusion 360. I have a Git repo, but I've been using Fusion 360 as one of the CAD tools for this. I did the initial design with Fusion 360. At some point, I got really frustrated with it and started doing some of the design in Rhino. So there's a mix of Fusion and Rhino files in the repo, but there's also just like industry standard like step and STL files also, which are good for interchange. So the Tuco Flyer org on GitHub is where all this stuff lives. And there's Winchbot CAD and Flyer CAD. So I think Winchbot CAD is where the pulley-related stuff lives. There's external pulley, which is the pulley at the ceiling. Well, all the pulleys at the ceiling. There are a lot of pulleys. Each corner has one of these external pulleys, and then the leash has another one, which is probably in need of replacement because it's not a really good fit for the job. It's just what I had handy. And then, what was that other piece called? Oh, was the leash part of this repo? I think the leash might have been part of the Flyer repo for some reason. Yeah, leash anchor ring. GitHub can't render step files, that's fine. So leash anchor ring is, yeah, this is a piece that actually the cables go through this. It's printed in NinjaFlex, and it acts as kind of a squishy, grippy interface between the cables and the harder plastic pieces. But then the main piece is this thing. No. Sorry, that's where we just were. This piece. Oh wait, no, this is... That's the part that anchors the leash to the Flyer body. Ceiling anchor. That's what I was looking for. Yeah. So this piece is on the ceiling. We didn't really get a very good look at it because we were looking at this from like this angle, so we weren't really seeing much. But the leash comes in over this edge, passes through here, gets clamped in the very middle. Stop moving. Comes down this side. There's a nice big turning radius so that we're nice to the cable and we don't overly damage one single part of it as much as we otherwise would. So this is pretty good at holding the leash. This does nothing to hold the actual nylon counterweight cord though. So the way that's working currently is I have one of the external pulley modules immediately above this. I have cords going through the external pulley mount into the top of this, and that's what it's all supported by. And then that nylon cord just kind of runs over top of this whole thing and down the other side. And I think that is kind of binding up, like scraping up against the edge of this mount, and that's what a lot of the noise is coming from. Oh yeah, good question. Kitlith is wondering if I've heard back from anybody with ideas about what to do with that HelloSense device that we tore down a few weeks ago. I don't think I've heard anything about that yet, but do let me know if you have any. This was a pretty interesting Internet of Things-y device. It was originally billed as a kind of fancy high-tech sleep monitor. So you put it in your room, it's this kind of orby thing that connects to the internet and has some sensors. And yeah, it's like really beautifully made and has some interesting parts. And now the company that makes them went out of business and their cloud service is not operating, and so the device is not actually useful anymore. So yeah, we got a really nice one donated a couple of weeks ago, and looking for projects to do with that thing. So yeah, let me know if you have any ideas. Let's see. So can we actually get these in Fusion 360, or am I gonna have to switch to the Windows machine? Flyer. I don't see the ceiling anchor in here. Oh, okay, I made a separate mounts directory. This doesn't quite match the structure of the GitHub repo, but whatever. Do I have Space Mouse? Do not have Space Mouse. Okay, well the Space Mouse drivers are not working, but this is also just kind of slow, and so I think I'm just going to switch to the Windows machine. Not because of the OS, but just because it's a lot more powerful than this Mac Mini. Is this machine even awake? This machine might be off. Let's turn the Windows machine on. I think it was asleep. Yeah, okay. Kitless says it would be cool to figure out how to put our own firmware on it without taking it apart. That would be a neat milestone, I guess. I would find it potentially more, I don't know, like, I think the thing that I'm really looking for is something that has a technical interest, but also like an interesting narrative to it. Sorry about the flickering. I need to actually, I think the machine is on now, but it's got that monitor disabled. It's gonna give you a better Tuco view for a sec while I deal with that. Sorry about all the flashy stuff. Oh. So Kitlith was tired of working on this themselves. Yeah, that's a problem I have with some of these reverse engineering projects. Is like if it's something that involves like just huge amounts of effort expenditure, it can get hard to sustain that if there isn't like a community around it or like somebody you're doing it for, or you know some other purpose that can stay motivating. Oh, Lars says these patterns are data. Oh, the flashy patterns that you were seeing? Yeah, those were, that was what my video setup here does if you connect the HDMI switcher to an input that has nothing on it. So, can I simulate that again? Well, so you saw it just momentarily. So you're seeing some patterns which are clearly not random. Yeah, so I think that's actually just video memory from inside the video capture device that I'm using, being reinterpreted in a different mode and or being used before initialization. And so you're seeing some of that while the mode switch is happening. I think that is memory that exists inside of the HDMI to USB 3 converter that I'm using, if you're curious like where that is physically located. It wouldn't be from the HDMI switch, because that doesn't have any memory, it's just like forwarding the HDMI signal. Yeah, so that's, as Kitlith is pointing out, there's some interesting stuff on that HelloSense project because the source code was fully released, and so there's just a lot there too. Like I haven't spent a lot of time just digging through it. There's a lot there, and so it could be interesting to do something with that. All right, is this going to be faster? So far, so good. Yeah, okay, this is much better. Ah, is Tuco eating garbage? Hey, dude. Oh, Tuco. Oh, Tuco, don't be eating garbage tonight. Ah. Tuco is not the pickiest eater. Sometimes he will nom on plastic things. Alright, so we've got one of these. I don't really want to reprint this unless we have to, because this is a large piece. This takes up my entire 3D printer bed. Let me see if I can get the other piece here too. You know, this might be a good time to have like an assembly in Fusion 360. I haven't really done much with that. Like, do we want a new file that's like that references both of these, maybe? Because I wasn't aware of Fusion 360 having a separate type of file that is an assembly. I think you just have files that reference other files. I experimented with having much more deeply like referenced files in my Fusion 360 design a while ago, and one thing that quickly became annoying is that if you have, and they might have fixed this since then, but at the time I was doing this, if you have a design that references other designs and is no longer self-contained, you can't export that design as a single file in Fusion 360's native format. You can export it as like a step file or an STL, but like that no longer becomes like an exportable thing, which I found annoying because I wanted to have like a backup in Fusion 360's native format. So, oh, Tuco is eating garbage again. I should take the trash out. Tuco. Tuco. Managed to rescue a piece of plastic before he swallowed it, which was good. And then I stepped on a bolt, which was the yelp you heard. Tuco. Indiscretion in his eating, I guess. You done? You done with me, Tuke? Oh hey, it's past that hour 30 mark. Let's see if the screenshot bot worked. Here I am procrastinating CAD by looking at social media. Just like every day. Oh yeah? I think that worked as intended. So streaming bot. That's what we were doing at the time. I think you're gonna see it on Scanlime Live as well. Yep. Alright. Social media bot, same as functional. Oh yeah, that's really cool that you found a buffer overflow. I'm with Allison on this. That's nice. I think I can just drag these in here and it'll... No? Okay, I have to save the design first. That's cool. Ceiling assembly, I can call this. Gosh, I went to this machine because it's so much faster, but it still takes a sec to import some of these things. This machine is pretty fast. Part of why it was off is because I only use this for editing and CAD apparently, but like it's kind of power hungry. Yeah, this is my editing beast. What is Tuco doing? Tuco? Are you puking? Oh. I really thought I heard something that sounded like Tuco throwing up, but then I find him in the litter box and there's no puke, so I guess I was imagining that. That's not the best thing to imagine. I could do better than imagining cat puke. So yeah, this is the machine that I upgraded, and the old motherboard for this machine is the one that's running Diode Zone right now. Diode Zone, oh yeah. It's gonna take a while for all the videos to show up here because it's transcoding, but anyway. So that shows up. Can we also add the X pulley? And then I think we could make a joint. I mean, right now I'm just gonna kind of put them sort of where they were without making a rigid joint because we're about to change this. So this is the top side of the pulley. These holes just come straight out, whereas this is the bottom side, so it was designed to have these channels where the cord kind of makes a loop from one side to the other. So yeah, this bottom section was purpose designed as a ceiling anchor. The top section though is just a general purpose pulley, and I made that for the corners, but can we hide this taskbar? Yeah, so we have 5 of these pulleys. There's this one, there's one in each corner. They were actually designed for the corner use case, and in that use case, there's a cord that goes all the way through on this side, around, through on this side, around the top, and then down the other side. It forms a continuous loop through the sides, around the bottom, and around the thing that it's anchored onto over the top. So even if all this 3D printed plastic were to disintegrate, you'd still have the rope that goes through that channel holding everything together. That maybe shows a little better in section view. So like that. Tuco. Put the covers and sandbag back on the computer so Tuco doesn't get inside it. Oh, serial. Yeah, serial over USB. It's amazing how often you see that, like a physical USB connector used for TTL serial. Alright, so the way this is set up right now, I've got those cords that would usually loop around down here and then back up. I've got them instead just passing through into the ceiling anchor's similar contraption, and then actually making the loop once they've reached all the way at the bottom here. So it's not great, like these holes do not really line up, so there's a little bit of a weird kind of jog where the cord moves sideways and then back. It's not that bad. The thing that's really annoying right now is that this cord, the nylon rather, this is a nylon, like a nylon monofilament, like relatively heavy-duty fishing line goes through here. And it's just kind of scraping on this edge here. And in fact, I think the best case would be it scraping on the inside of this edge. But I think on one side it's actually kind of popped out, and so it's scraping like on this edge right here. Not good. I don't know if it's super common, but I've seen it a couple times at least. And because like micro USB at least is a nice connector, so people misuse it. So yeah, I can imagine doing different things with this. What is that? Is that just an extra little nugget of mesh material? That's one side, that's the other side. That's the squishy bit. That's a bolt. It's a nut. This thing labeled unstitched is actually a bunch of bolts. Seems fine. That seems to be part of body too. If I was gonna try to turn this back into an editable, printable model, I might care about fixing this, whatever it is. It might just be a matter of deleting, like, I don't know what Fusion 360 calls this object, but like, a collection of surfaces that form an enclosed area here. I thought that was a body, but this seems to be just part of that body. Is this whole thing just one face, actually? Anyway, I'm not extremely worried about that. The main reason I imported this model was to have locations for the screw holes. But yeah, that's weird. Oh, Tuco's in his mood where he just prowls around looking for stuff to get into now. Mateus was looking forward to Tuco eating plastic. I don't know why. I mean, Tuco does it. It's not good for him, but he can do it. It just goes straight through. I mean, the thing he usually does is he'll just chew on some thin plastic like a garbage bag for a while, and he'll eventually just chew an entire circle out of it and then just swallow the interior. And so I managed to catch that process where the circle was mostly cut out, but he had not actually swallowed it yet. Hey, Tuco. Brr. So I'm trying to come up with a simple fix for this. Right now, I mean, I could have various definitions of simple. I think, what are my priorities? I'd like to not have to reprint the purple piece. I'd like it to be easy to keep the counterweight line clear of everything else, which, that's the part that I'm worried the most about. Like, I'm not extremely clear on how to actually do that. One thing that could come to mind is making pulleys like this, possibly a modified version of this piece, which attach like over here. And so let's mock that up. Can I make a duplicate of this? Because I think we're gonna need multiple pulleys. You're now witnessing me being in my paranoid, heightened senses, like every sound could be Tuco eating something he's not supposed to be mode. Oh, there he is. This is just why I need to keep him on the robot, right? I always have a pile of stuff that I'm in the process of sorting, and he always makes me nervous by trying to sort it for me. I know, Tuke. This also helps me notice, it gives me a way of early detection for objects that Tuco is likely to chew on, because he'll find them in that pile and chew on them. Dude, you want to play, don't you? Tuco. Is this yours, Tuke? Oh, that was a little bit off camera. Wow. Good job, boy. Is that a bad throw? How about this one? Sometimes it's hard to tell what he wants. How about this one? Also no. How about one of these? that what you're into? No? Sometimes I think what he actually wants is not any particular game, but it's just the concept of having 100% of my attention. And so anything I do while I'm streaming is going to be insufficient. Aw. Lars says, I know how you feel. My lizard's been in a mischievous stunt mood for days now. Can't take my eyes off him for a minute. Aw. I'm sorry, I can sympathize, but I also think it's cool that you have a lizard. I've never been, like, friends with a reptile, but I think they're really cool, and I think it'd be cool to get to know reptiles better. Hey, Fuzzbo. Oh, that's frustrating. Kayla says the frustrating thing regarding the hello was that there was supposed to be a community of people working on it. They were invited to a Slack, but then they ended up being the only person actually posting. Yeah, it's frustrating when community stuff goes like that. It's not uncommon, I guess. Aw, and then they posted my video. Aw. Oh, when the camera goes to that particular location, that's like a home position that it always knows is safe, and sometimes it'll go there as a result of this gimbal wobble detector having a false positive kind of day, which it does a lot of. That's definitely should be in the issue tracker if it isn't. Well, I could use a joint to make this actually parallel to that surface. Which is maybe what I'll do. I just kind of wanted to get a sense of this first. Tuco! Oh, honey. No. I feel like I need to personally guard this trash until I can take it out, because otherwise Tuco will try to eat it. So I'm going to spend the rest of this stream sitting next to a trash, because you know, that's just the kind of person I am. So, you know, I can imagine something kind of like this, but maybe less temporary looking. Okay, so the nylon cord is going to pass from like there over to there. And one potential hazard is that that would need to go right between these mounting cords. That might be fine, because all that should be under tension. These mounting cords will be going straight up, and the nylon cord should stay tight between the two pulleys. If I'm going to do it this way, I want to write a constraint such that the inner runner in the pulley has kind of a defined amount of clearance from the top of this piece. Make sure that that's enough that the fishing line isn't going to rub, but not so much that it's going to hit other parts of these like support cords once they kind of move further away from this point. Tuco seemed like he really wanted to explore the hallway, so let's try letting Tuco explore the hallway. What just happened? Okay. I know those aren't quite at the same angle, but I'm just like prototyping this out. So like if I had something like this where maybe there was a new version of this pulley piece, as I don't mind reprinting parts of this pulley. I could even reuse the central part if I needed to. I mean, I'm going to need more pulleys in this situation, so I'm going to probably just need to print a couple more copies of this, assuming the design is at all similar. And then I could have a version of this enclosure piece, which like kind of attaches into here. I didn't design these extremely as screw holes. They were intended more as like weight relief, I guess, and making it more transparent. But I kind of figured I might end up needing to use them as screw holes, so I made them big enough, but not like a particular size really. How big are these? .2 millimeters diameter. So I think I could use an M6 screw there with maybe a little bit of plastic interlocking. Or something smaller like an M3 or an M4 with much more plastic. Like imagine something where, so like this pulley piece is in two halves. Imagine if this half just extended over, had some sort of plugs that filled these holes, and then kind of extend down and like meet the other half's corresponding plug. And then there's a screw that just goes through all of that and holds it together. I could also use a grouping of 4 holes here, which would be even stronger. Just have like plastic plugs that fit in all 4 of those, and then extends that whole thing out with a pulley mount. That might be nice. And then the whole thing would still hoist from the center. So then that would put all the load from the counterweight system on these plastic arms, which I'm pretty okay with. The whole counterweight system is pretty light. As I was mentioning, the counterweight is in the range of like 100 or a couple hundred grams. So I think it can handle that just fine. The other consideration, I guess, was my neighbor saying hi to Tuco in the hall. I'm also happy to put these pulleys a little closer to the center. I think the trade-off there is it makes it a little harder to keep this completely out of the way of that, for example. And I think in that approach where the like plugs are going through here, I want to do my best to keep this central channel as open as possible. Like I don't want this pulley constraining the motion of the leash more than I have to. What if this was between these two holes, maybe? And that seems kind of nice too. I can also clearly like have it attached to these holes, but then put the pulley anywhere. Like this angle doesn't need to be straight out. So I can adjust that. I'm just trying to get a sense of what would be easy. Like this, for example, could be more like that, but with some of this plastic missing or repositioned. So from this perspective, like the flyer is down here, you'll see the leash itself going up into this channel and then over and down. And then the counterweight line, the monofilament that actually holds the leash, goes up into this pulley and then over here and then down. And then I think the rear counterweight pulley on the top is where the compound pulley system starts, maybe. And so this is maybe where I get to choose what the mechanical advantage is like. I could have one pulley on top and then have the nylon cord go down to the counterweight, have a pulley on the counterweight, then have it come up and then anchor. Or I could have two pulleys on the top. I could go back up and then down and then anchor on the counterweight. Which would give it a 4x mechanical advantage, which would be kind of nice. Like, I would like the counterweight to not have to move very much in this scheme. Also, I kind of wanted to keep this pretty symmetrical around this middle point, if I could, so that it balances. Well, I guess fundamentally I want to keep it balanced, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's symmetrical. Right now it's symmetrical and it's not really balanced because I think it's tilted more toward the side that the rear side of the leash is hanging on. I kind of like this being further out, actually. If anything, the front pulley should be further out and the rear pulley should be higher up, which I think might help it balance. And then this might be a compound pulley. This also gets annoying because, like, if I wanted to stack two pulleys side by side, then it becomes important for the first pulley that this cord passes to, for that to be directly lined up so that the nylon paracord. I should really have better names for these different things because they're all nylon, but let's call these the support ropes. Go through here. So these will be the support ropes. This will be the leash itself going through here. That's just wire. And then these pulleys will be for the counterweight line, I guess we'll call it the counterweight line. So the counterweight line needs to pass directly through the middle of the support ropes. Otherwise, it'll rub on those. I think that means that if I have two pulleys up here, the second pulley needs to be to one side or the other, which then makes it more imbalanced. If I only have one pulley on top, that gives me 2x mechanical advantage if I have one pulley on bottom and then an anchor on top, and that's actually fine. Where do I physically want the counterweight to be? So right now, can I have more objects here? Oops, I kind of wanted that to capture position. Okay. Let's just have some stand-ins for these chords. So this is the leash itself. You have to use your imagination a little. And it'll come out at some angle. It won't tend to come out at much of a side-to-side angle here. Oh gosh. What kind of coordinate system are we dealing with here? Clearly created this with some kind of weird coordinate system, but whatever. The actual leash is not pointed in a straight direction either. I just want to make a couple of mock-up bodies here for testing. Right, and then we've got another, oops. So these are going down to the robot eventually. And this is kind of supporting the leash, and this is draping below the supports for some distance. Those will go in a similar direction, but this needs to be above that. And then this is like the least accurate CAD work you'll see me do. Oh, I guess I can't change the length of this cylinder without changing all of these, since those were done as copy pastes. That's interesting. That makes sense. That wasn't quite what I wanted, though. If this were Rhino, there are some things that I still need to learn how to do in Fusion 360, like, oh, should I move my working plane over there? And now actually I'd probably create a temporary plane. Actually, let's just do this the right way. I'm struggling to do this the bad way. I might as well just do it the proper way. For some definition of proper. So I could construct an axis through a cylinder for the middle of this pulley. Now I've got a reference line here. A little harder. I was trying to make that line larger, which was a little hard to do with that body in the, or with that whole component in the way. I wonder why I'm not seeing that construction line by default. If I highlight it, I can see it. Huh. Anyway, now I can make a plane. I can make a sketch on the plane. Project stuff. Yeah, so I could project all that if I wanted to have like the full contour of this little groove there. I could also just put down a circle and then label it with some diameter, like say 2 millimeters, and then say, I think I want to make a line here. Make that a construction line maybe. And then make another construction line. And put this on that midpoint. That's better. It's overkill for the situation, but it's nice to do things the right way sometimes. Then I could define a similar plane to act as the other endpoint. Oh, no, Tuco. That's my trash bag for now. No, it's my trash bag. You gotta eat something else, like chicken. Gosh, I should stop the stream just to take out the trash, maybe. Okay. Oh, and this also makes it obvious that we didn't really line up the pulleys, but whatever. Oh, Tuco. Hey, Fuzzo. Honey. Honey, that's not food. Oh, dude. I feel like sitting on top of this trash bag. Okay, anyway, let's take another couple of copies of this mock-up piece. Or maybe just a plain old cylinder. I get tripped up by the number of times Fusion wants you to press enter sometimes. It seems like more or less than I'm expecting. Okay, so the lines that go out to the robot are always going to come out at kind of a weird angle. That's fine. The line over on this side for the leash, this is always going to come out pretty much straight down, no matter what the rest of the system is doing, because this has a decent amount of weight to it. It's not attached to any weights, but just the weight of the cable pulls down. And it's got nothing else like the robot dragging it in a particular direction, so it's just going to follow gravity. So we've got the robot going that way. We've got the leash there. There are also some other lines to keep an eye on, which there's some static lines that actually just hold this up on the ceiling, because there's some other pulleys that are not dynamic pulleys, so I'm not really talking about them, but I need to keep that out of the way too. Use the garbage at a counterweight. Yeah, it might be about the right weight too, and it would keep it away from Tuco. Tuco would find a way to climb the curtains or something just to eat it. Oh, I think Tuco's really into the view outside. Sometimes I'll just hold him and we'll look out the window. The garbage is safe for now. But at what cost? Alright, now this one goes down, and right now, that basically hangs down too. In fact, this one's a little bit straighter than that one because the counterweight does actually hang 100% straight, whereas this is fundamentally attached to something on the other end. But they're both going pretty down. Then we have an opportunity to bring this back up at some point, right, to anchor it. So this could go down to another pulley of the same diameter, and then come back up on this side maybe and attach around here. The trouble with that is now you've got a moving line that comes really close to a static line, and there's another potential for friction. Maybe it comes down and then goes around the other way, and then this attaches like out here somewhere. That's starting to use up enough like space that I have to start worrying about this like hitting the wall, but that might be doable. I kind of like the idea of it anchoring like in the middle here though. So if I have this come down, go around this pulley this way, and then back up, if it anchored somewhere, say, right between this whole area, so maybe this pulley mount comes down a little further and there's a nice solid tie-off right here. Then I have another pulley down here, and it seems like there's room for that. It would go around here, back up. This could wobble around a little bit, and still probably wouldn't brush up against this to any significant degree. It'd be way better than the current situation. And that means I can, so I've already got one of this exact pulley 3D printed. It means I can reuse that and use that for the counterweight. And then both of these could be new pulleys. So I could make them a new design. I could redesign the inner part if I want to. I don't know if I have a reason to. I kind of like this pulley design. So I might just print a couple more of that red piece unless I already have some spares. I should check my inventory. But I think I'll need to print a couple more of those. And then design some outer pieces. Will they need to be too different or the same outer piece? It seems like they could be the same, right? Like they would need, like this back one needs an extra tie-off point somewhere there, but like that wouldn't get in the way over on this side. I mean, it might also be easy enough to design one thing that has like an optional version, like a variant that I can print. All right. Well, I'm thinking that maybe that's a good stopping point for this particular discussion and maybe this particular stream. I really should actually take out this trash before I just like space it out and Tuco eats an entire trash bag. But yeah, I'll do some of this on and or off stream. We'll keep working on Tuco Flyer. There's a lot of different aspects to that project we can keep poking at. So let me know what you find interesting, and I'll just try to keep the content coming. And as usual, I'm trying to find a good balance between edited content and live streams and whatever, so let me know what you think there. Lately, I spent a bunch of time just focusing on the edits, but then more recently I've been doing like infrastructure for like the PeerTube stuff, and been trying to do more of a regular streaming schedule. I kind of messed it up this week, but I would like to try to get back into the Tuesday, Thursday-ish streaming schedule that I was on, so you know, let me know what you think about that too if you have any opinions. Alright, well, let's see how the PeerTube server is doing before we sign off. Still pretty light on the load. I don't have anything to worry about as far as running out of network yet. And this thing is still mostly waiting on transcodes. This is the last thing that actually finished transcoding. hard to tell whether the transcodes are part of the lag here, because the machine has no free CPU now, which is kind of the way I wanted it during transcodes, but it's possible I get better responsiveness from leaving a little bit of idle time. I've not actually done any measurements around that yet. Alright, well, I hope that was interesting. As always, special thanks to all my patrons who support me monthly at patreon.com/scanlime and keep these streams and videos coming. That's like how I make this my day job, really, is through the generosity of a lot of viewers like you. So thanks so much, and I continue trying to do my part and bring you interesting stuff on a regular basis. So let me know how I'm doing, and I'll keep trying to bring you cool stuff, and maybe doing more of it with my own web hosting so that we rely a little less on the big companies out there. I'll take this trash bag out and say hi to Tuco for everyone. See you next time. Happy hacking, folks.